By the end of the last video, we'd created our calendar here, and we joined our calendar table up to our project table, our fact table, by joining the calendar date against the start date. And that allowed us to create visuals like this one on top, where we take the project cost, a measure of the on the project hierarchy, against the calendar. So we can look at the calendar hierarchy by quarter or by month and so on. What it didn't do was anything for our end date. If you remember, our project table, as well as having a start date, has another date column, the end date. And the end date, we haven't done anything for that. If I come back here we've got a chart of our end date, and it's by date. We can't yet group that by year and quarter. Now, one solution maybe to that is, instead of having just one calendar table, have two calendar tables, a start calendar table and an end calendar table. Let's have a look at how that approach is going to work. So here's our updated model. Instead of having a single date table called calendar, I've got two date tables, one called start calendar and one called end calendar. And what I've done is I've renamed all the columns in the start calendar to begin with start and ditto for end. Let's create those relationships between our calendar and our project table. Starting with our start calendar, we're going to go from start date to start date on the project table. And there we go. That's our first relationship. We can also do the same with the end date on our calendar, going to the end date on our project table. And finally, because we don't need to see the end date and the start date any longer in the project table, because we have the same column in the calendar table, what we can do is I can hide these two there. And so we can see now that they're hidden. Let's have a look and see what it gives us in terms of visualizations. We're back in the report pane, and let's have a look at our field list. We can see that we've got our end calendar here, and we've got our start calendar here, and we've got our project table here. Notice in the project table we don't see start date or end date because we've hidden those. Let's try and create a visual. So I'll create a line chart, and I'll use my project cost, and I'll do that against my start calendar hierarchy. Again, for this it's probably best to do it as a bar chart, and what I can do is I can drill down from year to quarter and so on. In the same way, I can create a bar chart for my end date hierarchy, which I couldn't do before. So here we've got the same. We're looking at this time by end date, and if I go by quarter and then by month, we can see there's a different pattern. This is what we've achieved, which we couldn't do before. One possible small improvement that we can do to our date tables is to hide all those fields that appear in the hierarchy because they appear twice. So for example, end year appears in the hierarchy, but it also appears there. So let's do that. The quickest way to do that is to go into our modeling pane and come along to our start date, start month, start year and start quarter, ditto end date, end month, end year and end quarter, and just hide those values. And then when we look back at our visualization, that's looking, I think, a bit better. Are there any disadvantages to this many date table pattern that we've done? Well, perhaps. What we've done is created quite a large model with two new date tables, end calendar and start calendar. And if all we want to do is group the project start date and the project end date, then the auto date time that we saw a few videos ago here, we can see this, is maybe a little nicer because it has the end date table column in the project table and then the hierarchy local to it. Ditto, it has the start date column there and the hierarchy local to it. If that's all we want to do, this might be a neater field list. Yet the auto date time came with lots of disadvantages and lots of limitations. So in the next video, what we're going to do is we're going to create a neater field list, but with none of the disadvantages of the auto date time. Have our cake and eat it. So I hope you'll join us for that session.